"You're not on the list, sir." The words weren't loud. They weren't even cruel. But they landed like a scalpel, clean, quiet, and sharp. Dr. Langston Hale looked up slowly. The young woman at the entrance podium didn't meet his eyes. She glanced at his sweater, his travel-worn shoes, the absence of a flashy badge or lanyard. "This area is for delegate tier access only," she added, softer this time. "If you're here for vendor setup or catering staff, the service entrance is to the right." Langston said nothing, which was surprising, because he had partially funded the very room she was guarding. He didn't tell her that. He didn't flash credentials. He didn't ask for the event director, who had personally invited him twice. Instead, he blinked once, stepped aside, and walked toward the bench by the wall. What would you have done? Spoken up, pulled rank, or said nothing and let the silence collect receipts? Tell us where you're watching from, because what happens next is pure telltales. The Tokyo Garden Hotel lobby was cathedral quiet. Warm white walls, muted gold chandeliers, the scent of lemongrass and lavender floating just enough to feel expensive. Langston took a seat on the furthest bench, not near the espresso bar, not within earshot of the check-in counters, not where anyone of importance might be seen, exactly where they wanted him. He reached into his leather satchel and pulled out a jet-black notebook, corners frayed, spine cracked. Inside were 12 days' worth of handwritten logs, gate agent behavior, boarding patterns, service discrepancies, subtle disrespect. He flipped to the next page and wrote, "Date, Octave 14, location, Global Aviation Futures Forum. Incident, denied entry to delegate zone. No ID verification, appearance-based presumption, directed to vendor entrance, pattern matched, visual disqualification, confirmed." He tapped the pen once against the cover before capping it. This wasn't new. It was the 7th such incident since Seoul. But this time, it wasn't happening to someone else. It was happening to him. 12 days earlier, he'd left New York wearing a business-class blazer and Stratovault pin. The second day, he'd switched to off-the-rack clothing. Comfortable shoes, no accessories. By day 5, he'd removed his title from every booking system, declined all priority upgrades, and dropped to standard check-in lines. And by day 7, the pattern became unmistakable. People who looked corporate were ushered through. People who didn't were quietly questioned, redirected, or ignored. Langston had been both. He had lived both. And he knew exactly how it felt to earn access but not look like you deserved it. He glanced back toward the podium. Another man approached, European, mid-40s, custom-fitted charcoal suit. He barely slowed down. "Welcome back, Mr. Renault," the woman chirped. "Your scotch is waiting in the lounge." No ID check, no badge, just optics. Langston returned to his notebook. Entry granted, no verification. Based on presentation. Confirmed. He closed the notebook, set it on his lap, and leaned back. His pulse was steady, but his silence had weight. Most people in this building didn't know who he was. They knew Stratovault Systems, the data infrastructure company behind CrossSync, the real-time coordination engine used by 71 airports across the Pacific and Europe. They knew the tech. They knew the power. But they didn't know that Langston Hale wasn't just the founder. He was also the final authority credential holder of CrossEthica Gateway, the industry's ethics compliance backbone used by global ESG investors, airport alliances, and international booking platforms. He didn't wear it on a badge, because true oversight doesn't need to be seen. It just needs to know when to move. Across the lobby, a bellhop pushed a cart of champagne into the VIP zone. A small group of airline executives, 2 in navy suits, 1 in a gold sari, laughed too hard at something unfunny. Langston folded his hands. He had funded this summit not to be seen, but to see. He didn't care who got invited. He cared who got overlooked. 12 days, 7 cities, dozens of moments like this. He had watched. An older Korean woman struggled with a carry-on while a suited man was assisted without asking. A young engineer in a hoodie asked to wait for manual revalidation, while another guest in a Hugo Boss jacket was upgraded on the spot. A South African professor told, "Sir, this isn't the general queue," because of his briefcase. No one shouted, no one used slurs, but the message was the same. You don't look like you belong. Langston rubbed the edge of his ring finger. It bore a light indentation from his wedding band, a habit he'd kept, even after his wife's passing 4 years ago. She used to say, "You don't have to burn down the house to fix the wiring, but you do have to rip open the walls." This was the start of demolition. He opened his phone. A secure screen slid into view. System root protocol access. He didn't press anything. Not yet. Behind him, the glass doors of the VIP lounge hissed open. The same attendant stepped out, eyes flicking around, searching. Langston turned his face slightly away. She spotted him, hesitated, then walked over, all smiles now. "Dr. Hale?" she said, suddenly gentle. "I'm so sorry. We just located your name on the system. Looks like there was a syncing issue from our guest import." Langston looked at her. "System's not to blame," he replied quietly. "It synced just fine." Her smile faltered. He stood up slowly, notebook in hand. "I'll pass today," he said, and walked away, toward the garden, toward the light, toward the first move no one would see coming, until the moment they couldn't ignore it. The coffee tasted average. Langston sat on the garden terrace, a thin ceramic cup warming his palm. Beyond the glass rail, Tokyo shimmered in the late afternoon haze. The skyline was still, controlled. Like everything else in this city, nothing wasted motion. He liked that about Tokyo. It wasn't loud. It simply moved with intention, kind of like him. Across the terrace, a young man in a sleek gray suit laughed into his phone, pacing near the hydrangeas. 2 hotel staff adjusted cushions in silence. A breeze carried the scent of matcha and plum. No one paid Langston any mind, which was exactly what he wanted. He pulled out his notebook again, page after page, filled with observations. Customer with elderly gait asked to confirm identity twice despite priority badge. Black woman in plain jacket redirected to service line while white man in identical jacket passed. Passenger with stutter cut off mid-sentence by check-in staff. Voice tone, dismissive. The entries weren't dramatic. No yelling, no open discrimination. But they all said the same thing. How you're treated in transit depends on what they think you're worth, and what they think you're worth is what you look like. Langston's pen hovered over the page. He didn't write this time. He thought instead of a man named Ayo, a systems engineer from Nigeria who once told him, "Privilege isn't always a door. Sometimes it's just a smile you get without asking for it." That line had stayed with him for years, because it was true. Smiles weren't handed out equally. Not in airports, not in hotels, not at lounges like the one he'd just been denied entry to, even though he had funded part of its infrastructure and carried full VIP credentials. The same credentials that magically appeared in the system once someone realized who he was. Too late. The moment had already been logged. A voice broke his focus. "You mind if I sit here?" Langston looked up. A man in his late 60s stood by the empty chair across from him. Light gray travel jacket, comfortable slacks. Carry-on at his feet. Nothing flashy, but his posture was straight, and his expression polite. Langston nodded. "Be my guest." The man settled in with a sigh, set his coffee down, adjusted his glasses. "Busy crowd this year," he said, glancing toward the glass doors. Langston followed his gaze. Inside, behind the tinted glass, the forum was in full swing. Executives clustered in groups. Screens flickered with company logos. Laughter, name cards, polished shoes moving across expensive floors. "Busier than last year," Langston replied. "You were here last year?" the man asked, curious. Langston smiled faintly. Sort of. The man chuckled. Same here. David Mitchell, aviation consultant, semi-retired now. I used to run operations for Eastspan Logistics. Langston offered his hand. Langston Hale, traveler. David shook it. Ah, the rare kind of traveler who still uses notebooks. Langston tapped the worn cover with a small grin. Old habits. David took a sip of his drink, then leaned back in his chair. They did it to you too, didn't they? Langston blinked. Sorry? The lounge staff, the way they looked at you when you walked in. Like you'd wandered into the wrong room. Langston didn't answer immediately. David smiled. Not smugly, just knowingly. They did the same thing to me in Singapore last year, he said. Same thing in Seattle before that. Never outright rude. But the glance, the pause, the little extra, "Can I help you?" with just enough doubt baked in. Langston leaned forward slightly. You travel often? David shrugged. Used to fly 200,000 miles a year. Now just enough to remind myself I still matter. He paused. But apparently, I only matter when I wear a suit. Langston felt that land. Not because it was poetic, because it was true. David sipped again. You know what's funny? I have more miles than anyone in my division ever had. I helped negotiate our first cargo partnership with the UAE back in 2002. But now, if I show up in jeans and a pullover, I get flagged like a first-time flyer. He pulled out a folded paper from his coat, handed it to Langston. Dates, cities, flight numbers, small notes, tiny handwriting. Next to one entry, offered downgrade at gate after full fare purchase. No explanation. Langston looked at it carefully. Quiet. Focused. You keep records, he said. David nodded. I like patterns. They don't lie. Langston held the paper a second longer, then folded it and slid it into his notebook. David didn't object. He simply said, most folks just shrug it off. Say it's no big deal. But you stack enough no big deals together, it becomes a culture. Langston exhaled slowly. You ever file a complaint? 3 times, David said with a dry smile. Got 3 auto replies. We value your feedback. We're sorry for your experience. We'll forward this to the appropriate department. Nothing changed. He paused, then added, I don't need perks. I just want dignity. Langston stared down at the cover of his notebook. Then he said, not looking up, what if the system could be forced to care? David tilted his head. What do you mean? Langston finally looked at him, eyes calm but cutting. What if the gatekeepers who smiled too late didn't just lose a passenger, but lost access? David raised an eyebrow. You mean regulation? No, Langston said. Accountability. They sat in silence for a moment. The sound of laughter echoed again behind the glass. David shook his head. You know what the worst part is? Langston waited. It's not even about race all the time, or money. Sometimes it's just the shoes you wear, the way you walk. Whether you look like someone who's used to this, it's like the whole system is allergic to people who don't play the part. Langston's voice was quiet, but deliberate. Then maybe it's time we rewrite the part. They didn't speak for a few minutes. The sun slid behind a distant tower. Inside, conference moderators were preparing the evening keynote. But Langston wasn't going back in. Not yet. He pulled his phone from his jacket pocket and opened a second app. A secure channel. No one else in this building had access to it. A black screen appeared with a prompt. Cross Ethica Override. Authorized access only. Langston didn't type anything. Not yet. But he hovered. Because something had shifted. This wasn't about a snub anymore. It wasn't about a missed drink or a wrong assumption. It was about a culture that had been allowed to exist too long without consequence. And he wasn't here just to witness it. He was here to end it. By the time Langston returned to his hotel suite, the Tokyo skyline had faded into dusk. Tall glass buildings cast long shadows across the city, and the slow hum of elevators echoed in the hallways. He slipped his key card into the door. The sweet lights brightened automatically, soft, warm, unobtrusive. He didn't bother to take off his shoes. He just dropped his satchel on the couch, loosened his collar, and walked straight to the desk by the window. There, spread across the surface, was what most people never saw. Dozens of pages of printed data logs, handwritten notes, internal protocol reports from cross-sync systems, and an iPad displaying a heat map of override actions across 71 international airports. Langston stared at it in silence, then slowly sat down. He flipped open the notebook and pulled out the folded paper David Mitchell had given him that afternoon. Flight numbers, notes, gate times, small observations, most less than 10 words. But what they carried was weight, because what David had written, Langston had already seen mirrored in dozens of reports. And those reports now sat in this very room. He tapped the iPad. The map zoomed in. Singapore, Sydney, Tokyo, Atlanta. Dozens of flags lit up in red. Manual override actions. Each one required a frontline staff member to intervene in the system and either deny, delay, or re-verify a passenger's access or status. None of the overrides were triggered by ticketing errors. They were initiated based on human discretion. That was the problem. And that was the pattern. Langston sat back and exhaled through his nose. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was evidence. He clicked into one of the override logs. A flight from Incheon to LAX. A diamond-tier passenger had been re-verified 3 separate times before boarding. System note: customer does not match visual profile of expected status. He clicked another. A woman traveling from Bangkok to Sydney, business class. Told the upgrade list was closed. Yet 20 minutes later, a man with no status had been bumped to first class from the same gate. Brand-aligned presentation. That phrase appeared again and again. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a bug. It was a culture embedded in the system through discretion. And discretion, when unchecked, becomes silent discrimination. Langston opened a secure folder on his laptop. Inside were back-end system logs from 6 major airports. Each log showed how many passengers had been flagged for revalidation over the past 3 months. The racial breakdown? Unrecorded officially. But the location data, gate staff initials, and timestamps told a different story. He highlighted several patterns. One gate in Sydney had flagged 38 passengers for random ID revalidation in the last 4 weeks. Of those, 26 carried surnames of non-European origin. Another lounge in Singapore had initiated 22 manual downgrades, all directed at travelers with economy class presentation, hoodies, sneakers, rolling duffels, despite full fare bookings. He added a new note to his notebook. If appearance is the first filter, then dignity is optional. And we've built systems that reward that choice. He rose from his desk and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. Down below, headlights moved like fireflies across the city. Silent, predictable, but not fair. Not when access was earned by outfits instead of actions. Not when a frequent flyer's loyalty could be erased by a wrinkle in his shirt. Langston rubbed his jaw slowly. He thought of the woman who denied him at the lounge. Her voice hadn't cracked. Her smile hadn't faltered. Because to her, he was invisible. Because people like him, black, aging, understated, weren't seen as power. But that was their mistake. Because he didn't need to be seen to be felt. His phone buzzed. A message from Elaine in New York. Board approved your low-profile delegation trip. All cover arrangements holding. No leaks. He smiled slightly. Elaine Barrett. His chief operating officer for the past 17 years. One of the few people who could barge into his office without knocking and survive. He typed back, Protocol 9 on standby. Do not activate until system-wide sync complete. She replied in 2 words. Understood, quietly watching. Langston slipped the phone into his pocket, then returned to his desk, opened the locked drawer, and pulled out a single folder. Inside, The original draft of a policy he'd written 4 years earlier, but never pushed. PASF, Passenger Appearance and Service Fairness Framework. It had been shelved back then, considered too progressive by the board. Now, it was exactly what the industry needed, and he was the only one left with the power and the system access to enforce it unilaterally. He flipped the cover open and reread the first line. Dignity is not a luxury feature, it is the baseline. He ran his fingers over the sentence like a sculptor rediscovering a shape. Then he picked up his pen and wrote a single word at the top, reactivate. A low rumble of thunder echoed in the distance. Langston looked out again toward the city skyline. Tomorrow, the conference would continue. Smiling delegates, empty words about innovation, panel discussions sponsored by corporations still profiting from silent bias. And none of them would know that the very infrastructure they depended on, CrossSync's real-time traffic interface, was being watched, logged, and prepared for shutdown. Not as punishment, but as proof that when systems reward optics, they deserve to feel the cost of blindness. He opened his notebook again and began to sketch the structure for the new protocol rollout. Immediate data freeze on ethics non-compliant nodes. Notification to Cross-Ethica Gateway Consortium ESG investment feeds tied to compliance levels. Press blackout until post-sync lock. 48-hour runway before public board update optional appeal channels, monitored but not editable. It wasn't just a response. It was a roadmap for a reckoning. Then, for the first time in hours, Langston leaned back, let his eyes close. In his mind, he saw the man at the Tokyo gate, David Mitchell, quiet, dignified, tired of being overlooked. He saw the woman in Bangkok, the professor in Singapore, the engineer with the wrong shoes, and he saw himself, sitting on a bench by the wall, notebook in hand, while the world kept walking past. But not for much longer, because by this time next week, they would all know exactly who he was. Langston didn't sleep that night. He tried. He turned off the lights, drank a full glass of water, even pulled on the hotel robe and stared out over the quiet Tokyo skyline, thinking maybe calm would come if he waited long enough. It didn't, because once a system shows you who it really is, you don't unsee it. And tonight, the system had spoken, through override logs, passenger stories, and a polite rejection that would have meant nothing if he were someone else. But he wasn't. He was the man they didn't expect to be watching. And now, he was wide awake. At 3:27 a.m., he logged back into the Cross-Ethica Gateway dashboard. He moved deliberately. First, authentication. Then, the biometric scan. Then, the temporary encryption key, provided via a secondary device physically held by his COO in New York. 3 levels deep. Not because he didn't trust his people, he did, but because this key could freeze an entire ecosystem in under 2 minutes. He wasn't here to push that button, not yet. He was here to understand just how deep the rot went. A list of all active partner airports appeared, 71 in total, each displayed in green, status, connected, ethics score, compliant. But Langston knew better. He clicked into a cluster of flags logged over the past 30 days. A quiet web began to form. Override spikes, manual flagging, discretionary downgrade events. He highlighted 6 airports where this behavior was especially high. Sydney, Changi, Haneda, JFK, Doha, LAX. Each location showed a sharp uptick in security revalidation flags, initiated not by system alerts, but by staff discretion. And the pattern was clear. Passengers flagged were disproportionately older, black or brown, female, or simply dressed below business standard. Langston's jaw tightened. This wasn't about inefficiency. It was about perception. And perception, as it turned out, was being coded into behavior. He tapped a field labeled Flag Source ID. The screen blinked. Staff initials appeared. SJ, ATL-KR, LAX-DW, HNDT Reed. Admin Authority. Langston narrowed his eyes. That last one shouldn't have appeared at all. Thomas Reed. He hadn't seen that name in almost 8 months. Former regional director from Everspan Air. Transferred during the acquisition. Given a high-level role in cross-sync operations. Assigned to onboarding policy for lounge and gate agent alignment. Langston had signed off on that promotion personally after a glowing file landed on his desk. But now, seeing Reed's name as an administrative override approver, something clicked. Langston pulled up an archived memo from 11 months ago. Efficiency alignment for brand presentation. He remembered reading it late at night, scanning for legal exposure, then setting it aside with a note. Needs ethical review before rollout. But it had been rolled out anyway, without his second approval. And now, here it was, embedded in override logic that could approve or deny access based on brand-aligned indicators. Langston leaned back, furious. Not because someone had gone behind his back, but because they'd built a system that looked fair, on paper, while quietly sorting people based on bias. He stood and began pacing. 12 steps to the far window, 12 steps back. He could hear his wife's voice in his head. Lang, you always know it's wrong before you know how to prove it. That's your gift, and your curse. He stopped, turned to the desk, opened a second secure folder. Inside were personal notes, untouched for over a year. PASF 2.0, with hard enforcement. What triggers automatic audit status? Should dignity violations lock out investor feeds? He clicked open a protocol draft that had been shelved for reputational risk. Langston smiled bitterly. It was time for reputations to feel risked. At 4:05 a.m., he sent a message to Elaine. Pull full override log for Reed. Cross-reference with airport ethics scores, 90-day window. Her reply came instantly. Already doing it. You saw the Haneda spike too. Yeah, and he's embedded deeper than we thought. How far do you want me to go? Langston didn't hesitate. All the way. Confirm everything. Then call legal. As dawn crept into the room, painting the walls in pale gold, Langston finally sat again. He pulled out his notebook, wrote the names he'd seen. SJ, ATL-KR, LAX-DW, HNDT Reed, System Admin. Then added one more line underneath. They sorted me because I wore a 40-liter sweater. Let's see how they sort themselves when the money stops. At 8:12 a.m., his phone buzzed again. Elaine's message. Reed authorized 47 overrides across 5 cities, flagged 13 Diamond Tier flyers. 9 were later denied upgrades. I have names. Some of them are investors. Langston's hands froze over the keyboard. Investors. They weren't just mistreating passengers. They were mistreating people who fund the very system that was supposed to serve them. He exhaled. Slow, controlled. Then opened the activation module for Black Flag Override. It sat quietly in the corner of the system, used only twice in StrataVault's history, created for security breaches or confirmed unethical behavior across partner networks. Langston hovered over the field. His thumb stopped just above the biometric confirmation. He didn't press it, not yet. But he typed into the memo field. Condition met. Executable pending. He shut the laptop, stood, and walked to the window. Below, the city moved like circuitry. People in suits, taxis blinking, planes lifting off from Haneda, their wings catching early sun. He sipped his coffee, watched the sky, and whispered, not as a threat, but a promise. If you measure worth by what people wear, then you're not ready for what power really looks like. The conference room on the 34th floor of StrataVault HQ in Manhattan wasn't glamorous. That was intentional. No floor-to-ceiling windows, no art on the walls, just matte charcoal panels, a massive oval table, and chairs that didn't recline. This room wasn't built for show, it was built for decisions. And today, The temperature inside it dropped the moment Langston Hale walked in. "Good morning," he said, placing a thin stack of papers in front of each person at the table. He didn't sit. Not yet. Around the table sat 4 people: Elaine Yoon, Chief Operations Counsel; Marcus Bentley, Head of Compliance Strategy; Alicia Tran, Director of Ethics Infrastructure; and Lyle Jennings, Senior Legal Advisor. They were all seasoned, smart, powerful, but none of them spoke first. They knew better. Langston finally took his seat and leaned forward. "What you're looking at," he said calmly, "is a log of 47 manual override events tied to Thomas Reed, all within the past 90 days. He tapped the top sheet. Of those 47, 13 involved Diamond-tier passengers. 9 of them were later denied upgrade access or service priority, without cause. Alicia blinked. 9 investors? 4 confirmed. 5 currently in verification. But here's the bigger problem. Every one of them fits the same profile. Either female, black, over 60, or simply not dressed the part. Silence. Elaine broke it. That memo he pushed through last year. Brand presentation efficiency. It was supposed to be in pre-review. Langston nodded slowly. I never signed off on rollout. And yet, here we are, with system-level behavior that codes bias into gatekeeping, while using the language of efficiency to cover it. Lyle cleared his throat. Legally, how exposed are we? Langston didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to Alicia. Open the Cross-Ethica feed. She tapped her tablet, streaming live ethics compliance metrics to the center screen. Airport codes, trend lines, ESG flags, trust scores. All green, all wrong. Langston stood and walked over. This is what investors see, he said. Compliance, alignment, growth, but behind it, actual bias enforcement. He turned around. I'm not interested in legal exposure right now. I'm interested in ethical recovery. Elaine leaned forward. Lang, if we do this, if we activate PASF override enforcement, we're freezing 3/4 of our active airline partners. That includes Venture Sky, Solari Air, and the entire Beacon Alliance. Correct, Langston said. Those contracts total $1.4 billion in tied equity. I'm aware. And international investors will respect us more if we act decisively now than if we stall and end up on the front page of the Times when this leaks. He let that sit. Marcus looked down at the papers, then back at Langston. Just so I'm clear, what you're proposing is... Langston took a breath. I want full execution of the PASF override enforcement protocol. Today. He tapped the table. I want every flagged override traced, every unethical rejection cross-indexed. I want real-time suspension of all Cross-Ethica network privileges for non-compliant partners. And I want it done before the end of this week. Elaine gave him a long look. You realize this isn't just a legal event. It's going to feel like war. Langston smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It's not war, it's correction. He turned to Alicia. How fast can you push the system warning banners? 5 minutes. Do you want me to pre-announce or let the suspensions speak for themselves? Langston shook his head. Silence is power. Let the data disappear from their dashboards. Let the support lines ring without answers. Lyle looked troubled. Langston, I support the move, but you're going to face backlash. CEOs calling, boards questioning. Some may even threaten to pull funding. Langston returned to his seat. Then let them. He folded his hands. Let them explain to their boards why they think discriminating against paying customers was worth losing access to a 4.1b ethics platform. He looked at each person in the room. They don't get to gatekeep dignity. Not on our infrastructure. A long pause. Then Elaine nodded. I'll draft the compliance termination letters. Marcus. I'll prep investor guidance packages. Alicia. ESG scorings will be reweighted within the hour. Lyle. I'll contact the Senate Ethics Subcommittee. They'll want to know this is happening proactively. Langston nodded once. This isn't about revenge, he said. It's about building systems that don't need a human apology to work right. As the team got to work, Langston stood at the glass wall. Outside, the city pulsed. Somewhere, someone in a first-class lounge was being denied a meal because of how they looked. Somewhere, a veteran in economy was being treated like cargo. Somewhere, a child's boarding pass was being questioned because someone thought their last name didn't fit. And somewhere, the dashboards these decisions depended on were about to go dark. At exactly 11:46 a.m., PASF override enforcement activated. Cross-Ethica feeds at 5 airlines froze. Dashboards blanked. Support calls poured in. Boardrooms panicked. Investors demanded explanations. ESG scores plummeted. And 5 airlines, responsible for 62% of Stratovolt's active route infrastructure, found themselves locked out of the very system they paid to appear ethical on, all without a single press release. Just silence. Langston walked out of the boardroom, his phone buzzing non-stop in his pocket. He didn't answer it. Instead, he glanced at a single message Elaine had just sent. "It's done." He exhaled. Not relief, not triumph. Something deeper. Accountability. As he stepped into the elevator, a young intern entered behind him. She didn't know who he was. Just a tall black man in a simple gray suit, holding a notebook. She glanced at him, hesitated, then asked, "Are you one of the IT guys?" Langston smiled softly. "No," he said. "But I just fixed something." The first media outlet to notice the outage wasn't Bloomberg or CNBC. It was a mid-sized travel tech blog based in Singapore. Cross-Ethica feeds go dark for multiple airlines. System failure or ethics shutdown. That article dropped at 7:42 a.m. local time. By 9 o'clock a.m., Reddit was ablaze. Frequent flyers in business class subreddits were posting screenshots of glitched dashboards, missing upgrade records, and pending status flags that hadn't resolved in hours. At 10:17 a.m., someone leaked a redacted internal memo from Solari Air. Ethics sync failure at 5:46 ES10. Stratovolt has not responded to escalation. All ESG-linked data frozen. Investor hotline overloaded. Do not engage media. The internet didn't listen, and neither did the press. By noon Eastern, Forbes ran the headline, "Stratovolt quietly suspends ethics infrastructure for 5 airlines, 1.4 billion in contracts affected." And underneath it, a single line, "CEO Langston Hale has not issued a statement." He didn't need to. The world was already speaking for him. Langston sat in his office, the blinds drawn halfway, watching the chaos from the inside out. Elaine stood beside him, tablet in hand. "3 CEOs have tried to call," she said. Langston didn't turn from the window. "Which ones?" "Beacon, Solari, and Vanguard Pacific. They want a meeting." "They'll get one." "When?" "When they stop asking me why the system broke and start asking why their behavior triggered it." She smirked. "You think they'll admit anything?" "No," Langston said, finally turning. "But they'll feel it when the FAA starts asking questions." Elaine nodded. "That started an hour ago. The deputy ethics chair just asked for a full report on override logs." Langston smiled faintly. "Good, send it. Unredacted. Let the data speak." Down the block, 2 blocks from Stratovolt HQ, a breaking news broadcast aired from outside the FAA building. This morning, 5 major airlines lost access to Cross-Ethica, a compliance platform tied to ESG and ethics performance. Stratovolt, the system's parent company, has not confirmed the reason, but industry insiders say the move signals something deeper than tech trouble. It's accountability. A journalist, mid-report, paused as a black SUV pulled up behind her. Out stepped a woman in a gray blazer. Not Langston, but Alicia Tran, Director of Ethics Infrastructure. She held a folder, nodded to the cameras, and walked into the building with purpose. It wasn't a press stunt. It was a statement. We don't hide, we document. By evening, hashtags were trending worldwide. #ethics freeze, #gatekeeping costs. wait outside. No more. And surprisingly, Langston did it silently. That one made Langston chuckle when he saw it. He never had social media, never wanted it. But somehow, his silence had become louder than 1,000 tweets. Meanwhile, inside airline boardrooms across the country, fear had shifted into fury. At Vanguard Pacific, the CFO demanded an emergency audit of all customer service policies. At Beacon Alliance, 2 board members resigned by 6:30 p.m. after it was revealed their own families had been subject to silent overrides the year before. And at Solari Air, the CEO issued a private memo to their executive staff. We assumed ethics was marketing. Stratovault assumed it was law. We were wrong. Langston, however, wasn't celebrating. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't even watching the coverage. He was preparing. That night at 9:04 p.m., a secured call came in from Washington. Elaine put it on speaker. "Mr. Hale," a voice said. "This is Undersecretary Miriam Easton from the Department of Transportation. We'd like you to appear before the Senate Subcommittee on Aviation Ethics next week." Langston didn't flinch. "Happy to. Will they want data or story?" The voice answered, cool and direct. "Both." After the call, Elaine looked at him. "You ready for that circus?" Langston raised an eyebrow. "You think this was the storm?" She grinned. "I think this was the lightning. The thunder's coming." Langston nodded. "Then we'd better teach them how to count strikes." He stood, walked over to his desk, and opened a manila folder labeled PASF, Amendment Charter Draft. Inside were 3 pages. Page 1, a new mandate requiring real-time override audit trails for every ethics-related decision across all airline partners. Page 2, a proposal that any discriminatory behavior resulting in service denial triggers automatic investor score downgrades. Page 3, a demand for all partners to sign the Stratovault Passenger Integrity Charter or lose access to the platform entirely. It was bold, but so was silence. And Langston was done being silent. Across the world, airports were waking up to new realities. Screens flickered, investors called, auditors arrived. And behind it all was one man who'd been told he didn't look like a first-class passenger. Now the entire industry was being forced to redefine what class actually meant. The Senate hearing room was colder than expected, not in temperature, in tone. It was a full chamber. Reporters lined the walls, cameras blinked like quiet witnesses, and industry execs packed the rows behind the central table. At that table sat Langston Hale. No entourage, no PR team, no legal buffer. Just a man in a charcoal gray suit, reading glasses, and a sealed binder marked PASF Protocol, Ethics Charter Draft V.44. He looked calm, because he was ready. The session opened with Senator Karen Whitmore of Illinois, chair of the Aviation Oversight Subcommittee. "Mr. Hale," she said into the mic, "thank you for appearing today. We understand you're here voluntarily." Langston nodded. "Correct, Madam Chair." Whitmore continued. "Before we dive into your proposal, I want to begin by addressing what everyone in this room has seen: the collapse of 5 airline compliance feeds under your platform. Do you consider that an accident or a statement?" Langston looked her in the eye. "Both," gasps. Clicking pens. A CEO from Beacon Alliance shifted uncomfortably behind him. Whitmore raised an eyebrow. "Would you elaborate?" Langston straightened his papers, then calmly replied. "It was an automated response to a sustained pattern of unethical override behavior. Behavior tied to discriminatory service decisions, masked under policy language. The system didn't crash. It did exactly what it was programmed to do: protect passengers' dignity." Senator Dwight Manser from Texas leaned in. "So you admit you unilaterally shut down $1.4 billion worth of airline functionality based on, what, vibes?" Langston didn't blink. "No, Senator. Based on 47 override logs, 13 verifiable discrimination events, and internal communications describing customers as, quote, not the right look for premium service." He turned to the screen behind him. With a nod, a staffer activated the display. A flight log appeared. Date, passenger name, override tag, gate adjustment, visual misalignment. Another log, different airline, same pattern. And then, screenshots, Slack chats, agent notes, audit flags. One message, in all caps, read, "Well-dressed but black. Double-check first-class access." The chamber went dead silent. Langston didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "When a system rewards appearance over ethics, discrimination becomes protocol," he said. "This isn't about rogue employees. This is about institutional permission." Senator Whitmore exhaled. "And your solution is what? Public shame?" Langston shook his head. "No, ma'am. My solution is infrastructure reform. Quiet shame never changed a system. Structured accountability does." He opened the binder. "This is the PASF Charter, a proposed ethics standard to be adopted by any airline using Stratavault platforms." He laid out the core clauses. Clause 1, real-time override visibility. All staff decisions affecting passengers must be logged and reviewable. Clause 2, passenger dignity thresholds. Automated flags trigger if denial patterns match race, gender, disability, or age bias. Clause 3, ESG ties. Ethics violations directly affect investor ratings. And, he added, non-signatories will lose access to our system. That's when it happened. From the second row, Derek Flint, COO of Solari Air, stood up without being recognized. "That's extortion," he snapped. "You can't force private airlines to follow your personal morality code." Langston didn't even look at him. He addressed the committee. Solari Air is responsible for 9 of the override incidents, 3 involving senior passengers, 2 involving children, 1 involving a disabled veteran who was denied boarding after being flagged as too slow for priority access. He finally turned. "I'm not forcing morality. I'm enforcing decency." The chamber stirred. Senator Manser leaned back, visibly uncomfortable now. "And if these airlines don't comply?" Langston answered plainly. "They can continue without us, but they'll do it without the facade of ethical credibility, and without the support of ESG investors, federal transit programs, and consumer trust." Senator Whitmore glanced at her colleagues, then back at Langston. "Is there anything else you'd like to add?" Langston took off his glasses. "One thing." He looked around. "I was told to wait outside at an airport 3 months ago. I was wearing jeans, a baseball cap, and I was black." A murmur ran through the crowd. "I said nothing at the time, but I remembered the gate agent's eyes. How sure she was that I didn't belong. That's the thing about these moments. They're quiet, quick, dismissible." He paused. "But they add up, and systems that allow them to continue, that reward them, don't deserve silence." The room stayed still. Senator Whitmore closed her folder. "Mr. Hale, this committee thanks you. We will review your charter and issue a recommendation within the next 10 days. Langston nodded once. "Thank you, senators." As he stood, reporters exploded with questions. "Mr. Hale, do you think airlines will sign the charter? Will you name all airlines involved? Is this the end of Cross-Ethica?" Langston kept walking, but at the door he stopped, turned, and said just one thing. "This isn't the end of anything. It's the beginning of flying fair." Outside, as he stepped into the car waiting curbside, his phone buzzed. A text from Elaine. 3 CEOs just requested the charter draft. Beacon, Solari, Vanguard. Langston put the phone away. He didn't smile. He exhaled. Because the hard part wasn't pulling the plug. The hard part was getting the industry to admit the lights were fake to begin with. At Solari Air headquarters in Dallas, the walls were glass, the floors were marble, and the fear was palpable. 10 floors up, in a private executive conference room labeled Hawk Strategy Room, 6 people sat around an oval table, all in silence. No one was touching the catered lunch. No one was speaking. Until Derek Flint, the COO who had interrupted Langston Hale at the Senate hearing, finally broke. "This is bad," he muttered. "Worse than we expected." Across from him sat Carla Remy, the company's chief operating officer for passenger services. A woman in her early 50s, always measured, never emotional. She looked up slowly. "You think?" Derek didn't flinch. "Our ethics rating dropped 4 points overnight. ESG investors are pulling out. Vanguard's board chair just called our CFO a coward. Beacon's CEO sent me a 2-word message. You next." Carla leaned back, crossed her arms. Langston Hale just dragged the entire industry to the mirror. Derek rolled his eyes. "He's grandstanding, acting like he's Moses coming down from Sinai with some ethics tablet." "He didn't need to be Moses," Carla said, her voice low. "He brought data. We brought excuses." No one responded. Then, quietly, Carla pulled a folder from her bag and dropped it on the table. It was a printout of every internal override made in the last 180 days. Attached were red flags from Stratovault, flags they had intentionally ignored. "Remember Flight 2241 from Miami to San Diego?" she asked. Derek looked confused. "The one where the gate agent bumped a kid?" She was 12, Hispanic, flying with her grandfather. First-class ticket. Agent marked her as unattended minor, economic cabin only. Derek's face tightened. "We resolved that internally." "No," Carla interrupted. "We buried it, and Stratovault flagged it. Twice. We overrode it." There was a long silence. Another exec, James Duval, VP of Customer Relations, finally whispered, "We've been playing defense for too long." Carla looked at him. "We haven't been playing defense. We've been hiding." Then she turned to Derek. "I stood by you when you said we needed to look premium. That consistency was about curating the experience. I bought into it. But now?" She shook her head. "Now I see what we really curated. A system that punishes people for not fitting our photo shoot." Derek bristled. "You think Beacon's any better? You think Hale's some saint?" "No," Carla said sharply. "I think he's the first person in this industry who actually understood that infrastructure is values. And we built ours to reflect bias." Down the hall, a meeting was taking place in the Investor Risk Unit. A younger analyst named Dorian Mills, fresh out of Stanford, new to Solari, was presenting findings. His screen showed timelines, ESG fund withdrawals, and cross-referenced stock impacts. At the bottom of one slide, a bold line. Estimated market loss if Stratovault revokes total access, 3.1B. The room shifted. A director whispered, "That'd crater us." Another muttered, "We were warned." Dorian stood steady. "Langston Hale built the most ethical infrastructure this industry's ever seen, and we spat on it." Back in the Hawk room, Carla stood. "I'm done covering this up. I'm drafting an internal audit. Voluntary, full transparency. No more silence." Derek stood too. "You'll bury us." She walked to the door. "You already did." Then she paused, turned back and said, "You told Langston to wait outside. He just invited the whole country in." That afternoon, Carla made 3 calls. One to Stratovault's general counsel, requesting a private meeting. One to her internal ethics team, demanding access logs on every override from the past 24 months. And one to Langston Hale's executive assistant, Elaine. Elaine picked up on the second ring. "This is Carla Remy. I'd like to speak to Mr. Hale. Not for optics. For reckoning." Elaine paused, then said, "Hold, please." Meanwhile, at Vanguard Pacific, their internal culture task force had been secretly recording employee testimonials for weeks, long before the hearing. Most execs thought it was just HR fluff. Until now. One testimonial came from a black male flight attendant, 37 years old, with 15 years of service. He recounted being routinely placed in economy, despite seniority. When I asked why, a supervisor said, "You look too casual for premium. People expect a look." Another came from an Asian American gate supervisor who was reprimanded for boarding a disabled veteran early. "We want the entrance moments to feel clean," they said. That was the word, clean. When these clips leaked, not by accident, but through a whistleblower channel Carla helped open, they went viral. Aviation blogs, TikTok, evening news. Suddenly, Langston's hearing wasn't just about one man's silent revenge. It was a movement. At Stratovault, Elaine walked into Langston's office. "She's ready," she said. Langston didn't ask who. He just nodded. "Book Tokyo." Elaine tilted her head. "Back to the hotel?" Langston smiled faintly. "No, to rebuild the contract. In person." That night, Carla walked out of Solari Air HQ without security clearance stopping her. She was no longer hiding. She wasn't sure if she'd survive the fallout, but for the first time in 12 years, she felt like she was doing the job she was hired to do. Serve passengers, not optics. And far from Dallas, on a quiet rooftop in New York, Langston looked out over the East River and whispered to himself, "One breach doesn't bring down a wall, but one crack. That's how the light gets in." The sun had just begun to rise over Haneda International Airport, casting soft golden rays across the tarmac when the black sedan pulled up to the private terminal entrance. Out stepped Langston Hale. No hat this time, no hoodie. He wore a tailored black suit, crisp white shirt, and carried the quiet authority that had made senators lean in just a week earlier. But today wasn't about Washington. It was about this place. The same terminal, the same gate, the same country where they once told him he didn't belong. The assistant who'd previously waved him off like a background extra was gone. In her place stood a new protocol officer, young, visibly nervous, bowing deeply. "Mr. Hale-san," she said with reverence. "Welcome back. The boardroom is prepared." Langston gave a short nod. "I'm not here for the room. I'm here for Gate 41. Elaine, walking 2 steps behind, handed him the final printouts, translated and triple-stamped by aviation authorities in 3 continents. The PASF Accord. 7 languages, 15 appendices, 1 message. As they walked through the corridor, people peeked through office glass and cabin crew offices. Some recognized him from C-SPAN, others from trending clips on TikTok or LinkedIn. But most remembered him as the man in the baseball cap, the one who was asked to wait outside like he didn't matter. Now he walked with the weight of 5 airline CEOs panicking, a 1.4B industry-wide freeze, and the full control of the Stratovault core behind him. They reached Gate 41. No photographers, no fanfare, just the gate agent on duty, a man in his 50s with thin silver glasses and a badge that read, "Manager on Duty, Hoshino." The moment he saw Langston, his eyes froze. Langston said calmly, "Last time I was here, I was told to wait outside." Hoshino stood silent for a long second, then bowed, deep, humbly, and without performance. "I remember," he said, "and I'm sorry." Langston didn't return the bow. He placed the PASF charter folder on the counter. This is where it begins. By mid-morning, cameras had gathered inside the ANA Concord Hall, the same space usually reserved for international airline alliances or luxury brand press events. This time, it was different. Flags of 3 nations flanked the stage: Japan, the US, and a brand new banner stitched with the emblem of the Passenger Ethics Alliance. At the podium, Langston stood alone. "When I was 12, he began, voice steady, "I watched my mother get pulled out of a boarding line because her seat had been reassigned. She didn't raise her voice. She just whispered, 'They never expect us to belong.'" He let the silence sink in. I believed her, until today. He lifted the folder. "This is the Passenger and Staff Fairness Accord, a binding charter for service ethics in the sky." Langston didn't need flourish. The charter spoke for itself. Mandatory real-time audit trails for all seat changes, race-blind AI boarding queues, Open transparency dashboards passengers could access. ESG fund compliance tethered to ethics scoring. Patterns monitored, not skin color. No more arbitrary overrides without automated cross-validation. And the final clause, airlines refusing to sign would lose access to the Stratovault core, meaning they'd be locked out of over 76% of international scheduling, ethics compliance, and slot-sharing systems. This accord is not a press release. It's the new infrastructure, Langston said. Without it, you're flying blind. By the time the press conference ended, 3 airlines had signed on stage. Carla Remy, now acting on behalf of Solari Air, Daniel Ko, CEO of Zenith Pacific, and Mayumi Takada, the only Japanese executive willing to publicly oppose the Aviation Council and back the accord. Takada bowed and said in her accented English, "We are late, but we are here now." Langston simply replied, "The skies remember." Backstage, other execs whispered nervously. Some called legal. Others tried to reach PR teams. Most were trying to calculate the cost of not signing. One muttered, "If 4 more airlines join, we'll be boxed out of Asia and the Western Corridor." Another responded grimly, "We already are." Because without Stratovault, which Langston's firm controlled, no airline could maintain real-time ethics clearance. No investor would see ESG alignment, and no international hub would risk partnership. Elsewhere, in Harlem, Langston's goddaughter Zuri watched the broadcast on her grandmother's old flat screen. "Sheesh," Zuri said. "Uncle Langston really came back swinging." Her grandmother, once a stewardess in the 1970s, teared up. They told him he didn't belong. Now they need a key to enter his world. Back at the airport, as the media cleared out and executives rushed to re-strategize, Langston lingered at gate 41. No cameras, no statements, just silence. He looked at the seat where he once waited, humiliated, ignored. Elaine approached. "They're ready for the dinner reception." Langston didn't look at her. "No more waiting," he said softly, and walked away. Langston Hale didn't need to speak again. He didn't need a second press conference. He didn't tweet, didn't post a single quote, didn't accept any interviews. He simply returned to New York that night, not in a private jet, but in a commercial flight, tucked quietly into seat 1A. But the silence was thunderous. By the time his plane touched down at JFK, 5 airlines had already lost access to the cross-sync core. Not suspended, revoked. That meant no access to real-time runway allocation, no ethics clearance reports, and most dangerously, no ESG transparency certification. Without those, you couldn't borrow, and without borrowing, you couldn't fly. The next morning, at precisely 8:17 a.m. Tokyo time, the Ethos Core Index, the benchmark ESG credit fund that tracked airline ethics compliance, delisted 5 airlines: Skyfront, Imperial Jet, Beacon Alliance, TransAltis, and Neo Air. Within hours, $1.4 billion in funding was frozen across 14 bank consortia. Stocks dipped. Boardrooms erupted. Crisis calls were placed. At 9:22 a.m., CNBC broke the headline in red. Breaking: airlines who rejected PASF Accord lose cross-sync access, 1.4B frozen. By noon in London, regulators across the EU began internal reviews. In Washington, senators who once saw Langston as a tech guy who'd gone corporate were now pushing for a national ethics charter modeled on his PASF Accord. The world moved fast, but not as fast as reputation collapses. Inside Skyfront's Hong Kong HQ, CEO Richard Liu watched helplessly as 3 of their biggest routes, Heathrow, JFK, and Changi, were suspended pending ethical compliance verification. He slammed the table. "This is madness." But the room was quiet. Everyone knew. Langston Hale had flipped the game board, not with anger, not with lawyers, but with architecture. Systemic, elegant, permanent. 3 days later, FAA Administrator Melissa Gentry stepped onto a podium in D.C. Her tone was measured, legal. As of next fiscal quarter, all airlines operating within or through U.S. airspace must demonstrate PASF Accord compliance. Non-compliant carriers will not be eligible for slot allocation, code sharing, or government funding. This is not optional. The room went still. It was official. Langston's system wasn't just a tech layer anymore. It was now federal aviation infrastructure. Meanwhile, on a rooftop garden in Manhattan, Langston sat in a lounge chair with his coffee. The spring wind carried a soft chill. He stared across the East River, a half smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Elaine joined him, tablet in hand. "You've seen the headlines?" "I've seen the fallout. They're calling it the Hale Accord now." Langston chuckled, quiet and dry. "It'll fade." "But it won't," she replied. "They're building legislation around it." He didn't respond to that, just stared ahead. Elaine sat beside him. "Do you ever think about that moment? Gate 41? Langston's gaze didn't shift. "Not the humiliation," he said, "but the silence. That moment when you realize they don't even see you." He sipped his coffee. "That's the part I changed." That week, The Atlantic ran a cover story titled, "The Quiet Revolution of Gate 41, How One Man Rewired the Skies Without Raising His Voice." It went viral. Universities invited him. Governments referenced him. But Langston kept declining public appearances. He turned down TED, declined Davos, even refused a private dinner with the president, not out of pride, but because he was done speaking. The work had been done. The legacy was built. And the skies had changed. Across the world, at Narita Airport, Gate 41 was quietly renamed Gate H. An internal honor. No press release, just a placard, tucked at eye level. Airport staff who once looked through him now lowered their gaze when they passed that corridor. And passengers? They noticed the difference. Boarding announcements were clearer. No unexplained seat swaps. No random checks that weren't random. In fact, complaints dropped 42% in 3 months. One passenger tweeted, "Flew Zenith today. Noticed something subtle. Politeness, respect. And for once, no one asked me why I was in first class." Langston read that tweet from his couch one evening, then closed the app. He didn't hit like. He didn't repost it. He just leaned back, eyes closed, the faint hum of jet engines passing overhead. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had once been told to wait outside the very system he would one day own. Now, he had rewritten its DNA. And he didn't even have to raise his voice. It had only been 7 days. 7. That was all it took for the industry to shift from polite dismissals to desperate invitations. Langston Hale was now a man everyone wanted at their table. Not because of charm, but because of leverage. Quiet, structural leverage. The formal invitation arrived on a Tuesday. An embossed letter from the International Council for Ethical Infrastructure, ICEI, hand-delivered by a diplomatic attaché. Inside it read, "The board unanimously votes to seat you as Chief Advisory Architect to the Global Passenger Ethics Consortium." Elaine read it twice before looking up. "They're offering you a chair that didn't even exist before." Langston raised an eyebrow. "Then it's not a seat. It's a spotlight." And he'd never liked spotlights. By Friday, the congratulations flooded in. Some were sincere, most were performative. Daniel Coe, CEO of Zenith Pacific, one of the first to sign the PASF Accord, sent a private message. "Your leadership is overdue, Dr. Hale. We're not only aligned, we're ready to follow." That meant something. But then came the others. Richard Liu, CEO of Skyfront, who once refused to even greet Langston at an aviation summit, now posted a tribute on LinkedIn. Grateful to have voices like Langston Hale shaping the future of aviation. Langston didn't comment. He knew what it was: survival. For decades, men like Liu sat atop systems built to protect themselves. until someone rewired the walls. That weekend, the New York Times ran a profile titled, "The Man Who Silenced the Skies and Why He Won't Join the Noise." It traced Langston's journey from Chicago's South Shore to Harvard, through Silicon Valley, and ultimately to Stratovault, the platform he designed to monitor airspace ethics like an immune system. But what intrigued people more than what he'd built was what he refused. He turned down offers from 5 major airline boards. He declined keynote spots at the Global ESG Forum and even the UN Aviation Assembly. He didn't want to lead the stage. He'd already changed the script. One evening, while reviewing a new ethics dashboard pilot from Zurich, Elaine asked him, "Do you regret not taking the ICEI seat?" Langston paused. "Power without curiosity is dangerous," he said. "They don't want my ideas. They want my face, my name, a seal." Elaine nodded slowly. "And you won't give it." "I already gave the world what it needed," he replied. "Now it needs to use it." In Tokyo, at a closed-door ethics forum, a moderator joked nervously, "Well, since Dr. Hale isn't here, maybe we can speak freely." But the panel stayed silent, because whether he was in the room or not, his rules now governed the room. Back home in New York, Langston attended a quiet dinner hosted by his former MIT mentor, Professor Judith Bain. It was just 8 people around a round table, no media, no agenda. Midway through the evening, Bain leaned in and asked softly, "What will you do now?" Langston smiled. "Teach," he said. "Not lecture, but teach." "Teach what?" "How to see the system before you're inside it." She didn't respond right away, then nodded, as if finally understanding the long game he'd always played. The next morning, Langston walked alone along the High Line, a stretch of elevated park weaving above Manhattan's west side. No one stopped him. A few glanced, some looked twice, then looked away. He wore no suit, no tech, just himself. But behind that quiet walk was a man whose system now touched every airport in the G7. A man who had turned invisibility into influence, and who still refused to raise his voice. That afternoon, Elaine forwarded him another proposal, this one from a think tank in Geneva. They wanted to name their newest ethics framework the Hale Standard. He read it twice, then deleted the email. For Langston, the victory wasn't the name. It was the silence that now respected him, the systems that couldn't ignore him, and the world that now paused before making people wait outside. The sign still said Gate 41. A year had passed. Langston Hale stood at the edge of the terminal's glass corridor, watching the morning light spill across the polished tile. The same airport, the same gate, but everything had changed, and yet nothing had. No cameras followed him. No headlines announced his return. Just a man in a dark gray coat, rolling a leather carry-on behind him, waiting for a flight that didn't really matter. This time, he wasn't here for revenge. He wasn't here for closure either. He just wanted to see if the world had really changed, or if it had only updated its mask. He stepped up to the Skyfront VIP reception desk. Same counter, same marble, same logo. A woman in her mid-50s looked up. She wore the navy blue uniform of a lead concierge, her name tag reading Marla. Langston remembered her. She was the one who'd said it a year ago, not with cruelty, but with absolute certainty. "You may want to try the vendor line, sir." Today, she smiled. "Good morning, sir. Do you have a reservation with our Skyfront Executive Lounge?" Her voice was gentle, professional. Langston handed her his boarding pass. She scanned it, eyes flicking to the screen. "Oh, Mr. Hale." Her voice shifted slightly. "Welcome back." Back. She didn't say sir this time with condescension, but with weight, as if it belonged. "I see you're cleared for full cross-sync priority. Let me personally escort you inside." She stood, straightened her blazer, and led him toward the lounge entrance. Her posture respectful, not fearful, but aware. She didn't know he remembered her face. She didn't know the corridor they walked through used to be a wall, one built by 1,000 silent dismissals just like hers. And she didn't know that the very system now authenticating passengers, monitoring ethics, allocating VIP treatment, was designed by him. But Langston didn't say a word. Not about last year. Not about the PASF Accord. Not about the 5 airlines who lost access, or the 1.4B in frozen credit. Instead, as they reached the entrance, he paused. "Thank you, Marla." She blinked, surprised. "You're welcome, sir." He stepped inside the lounge. Inside, the space was quiet. Muted jazz played through invisible speakers. A waiter in black approached. "Would you care for breakfast, Mr. Hale?" "Just coffee, black." He sat near the far window. Outside, a 787 taxied slowly toward the runway. The sky was soft, dusted with early haze. Langston took a sip, leaned back, and opened the Stratavault Ethics dashboard on his tablet. Not to review, just habit. All indicators green. Passenger treatment index, 92%. Bias complaint rate, down 41% from last year. He closed the screen. The work was holding. He heard a voice from the other side of the lounge. A young man, probably mid-30s, wearing an airline badge and talking to a colleague. "You know, they rewrote the entire onboarding code last year. Someone from Stratavault flagged over 70 microaggressions in staff training. Real game changer." Langston didn't smile. He just listened. Because hearing it from someone who didn't know he was the architect meant the system had outgrown his name. That was the point. As boarding was called, Langston stood. As he walked out, Marla caught his eye again. "Have a safe flight, Mr. Hale." He nodded. "Marla, how long have you worked this gate?" She blinked, thoughtful. 13 years? Ever think about leaving?" She laughed. "Every week." Then added, "But lately, things feel different, calmer." Langston nodded once, then turned. As he walked down the jet bridge, a flight attendant held open the door. "Welcome aboard, sir." He stepped onto the aircraft, took his seat, 2A this time. No one questioned why he was there. No one checked twice. No one stared too long, because dignity, once embedded into a system, doesn't need a name tag. It simply becomes the default. As the plane ascended, Langston glanced out the window. Below him, the runways, the terminals, the towers, all part of a world he'd rewired quietly, piece by piece. No monuments, no plaques. Just justice. Distributed, silent, permanent. And somewhere, at a terminal far away, someone else, someone invisible, someone once told to wait outside, might now be walking in without being questioned. That was enough. Langston closed his eyes and smiled. Have you ever been told to wait outside, just because someone thought you didn't belong? What would you do if you had the power to redesign the system, not just for yourself, but for everyone after you? Tell us where you're watching from. And if this story hit close to home, we read every single comment.